Something that was stuck since November started moving today. You may have felt it before you understood it. A loosening, an easing of a pressure you had stopped noticing because it had been there so long it became background noise. A project that stalled 4 months ago and today sent you a signal that it is alive again. A relationship that plateaued and this morning showed the first sign of forward momentum in weeks. An idea that you had been carrying without progress since December that suddenly has a next step. Jupiter stationed direct today, and whatever Jupiter was holding is beginning to release. I want to zoom into the mechanics of what is happening, because the station itself is a specific event with a specific quality that differs from the ongoing direct motion that follows. When a planet stations, it appears from Earth's perspective to slow down, stop, and reverse direction. During retrograde, Jupiter appeared to be moving backward. Today, it reaches its still point, the moment of zero apparent motion. And from here, it begins inching forward again. The station is not a sudden shift. It is a turning of a massive body. Think of an ocean liner changing direction. The command is given. The rudder turns. But the ship takes time to respond. There is a period where the ship is neither moving in the old direction nor fully committed to the new one. That is today. The command has been given. The direction has changed. But the full momentum has not yet built. What you feel today is the potential, the sense that motion is about to happen. The actual motion builds over the coming days and reaches meaningful velocity by mid-March. Here is how to identify what Jupiter was holding for you specifically during its 4-month retrograde. Jupiter retrograde does not affect everyone in the same area of life. Where it lands depends on where Jupiter has been transiting in your natal chart. But there is a simpler diagnostic that does not require chart knowledge. Think back to October and November of last year. What was expanding? What was growing? What had momentum? What felt like it was going somewhere? Now think about what happened to that expansion around late November or early December. If it slowed, paused, went quiet, or turned inward, that is your Jupiter retrograde theme. The expansion did not die. It went underground. Jupiter retrograde takes external growth and converts it to internal growth. The opportunity was still developing, just not visibly. Like a seed planted in autumn that spends winter underground, gathering energy, developing root structure, preparing for the spring push. The seed does not look productive from above. Nothing is visible. Nothing seems to be happening. But underneath the surface, the root system is expanding, strengthening, finding water sources, establishing the foundation that will support the visible growth when it finally pushes through. 4 months of root development. That is what Jupiter retrograde was. And today, the seed breaks the surface. What you see emerging this week has 4 months of invisible infrastructure supporting it. That is why Jupiter direct expansions that follow long retrogrades tend to be more durable than expansions that begin from scratch. They have roots. They have been tested underground. They survived the winter. The first week of Jupiter direct has a predictable shape based on what I have observed across previous stations. Days 1 through 3, which is today through Wednesday, produce the initial signals. Things begin to loosen. Emails arrive. Conversations restart. Opportunities represent themselves. But the energy is tentative, testing, like a door that has been locked for months being opened and everyone cautiously peering through before stepping forward. Do not rush these first signals. Let them arrive. Let them identify themselves. The first things that move are the most refined, the most ready, the most deeply processed during the retrograde. Pay attention to what moves first because that sequence is informative. What Jupiter releases first is what Jupiter considers most ready. Days 4 through 7, Thursday through the weekend, produce the first real movement. Not tentative, committed. The door is open and people are walking through. Projects advance a concrete step. Plans that were on hold receive a green light from an external source. Travel that was postponed gets rescheduled. Educational pursuits that stalled receive new information or new options. By the end of the first week of Jupiter direct, you will have a clear sense of what the retrograde was incubating and what the direct station is now releasing. That clarity is worth documenting because it tells you where your growth trajectory is pointed for the next several months. Now let me walk through what Jupiter direct activates for each rising sign, because the expansion lands in a specific house of your chart, and the house determines the area of life that begins to move forward. If you know your rising sign from the eclipse work we did on March 1st, you can apply this directly. And if you do not know your rising sign, use your sun sign as an approximate guide. The house placements will be less precise, but the themes will resonate. Aries rising. Jupiter has been transiting your second house of income and self-worth. Expansion of financial opportunities that were developing internally now begins to manifest externally. A raise, a new income stream, or a clearer sense of your market value may arrive this week or in the weeks ahead. The internal work of the retrograde was about redefining what you are worth. The direct motion externalizes that redefinition. Taurus rising. Jupiter in your first house of identity and self-presentation. This is one of the most personally transformative placements. The personal growth and reinvention you have been processing internally starts to become visible to others. People notice a change in you. A new way of carrying yourself. A confidence that was brewing underground now surfaces. You look different to the world because you became different during the retrograde. Gemini rising. Jupiter in your 12th house of the subconscious and hidden patterns. The spiritual or psychological growth that was developing underground begins to integrate into your conscious awareness. Insights arrive from dreams, therapy, or quiet reflection. This placement often produces a sense of inner peace that radiates outward without you being able to explain its source. Cancer rising. Jupiter in your 11th house of community and future goals. Friendships and social networks that went quiet begin reactivating. A group project or community involvement resumes forward motion. The retrograde refined your understanding of which communities actually serve your growth. Now the communities that passed that test begin to expand. Leo rising. Jupiter in your 10th house of career and public reputation. Professional expansion that was on hold restarts. A promotion, project launch, or public recognition that was delayed begins moving again. This is one of the most externally visible Jupiter direct placements. Other people can see your career shift before you fully register it yourself. Virgo rising. Jupiter in your 9th house of beliefs and higher learning. Educational opportunities, travel plans, or shifts in worldview that we're processing internally begin to take concrete form. A course, a trip, or a philosophical realization lands this week. Given that the eclipse also activated your 1st house, this Jupiter direct creates a potent combination. Your identity shifts and your worldview expands simultaneously. Libra rising. Jupiter in your 8th house of shared resources and transformation. Financial arrangements involving others, investments, Debts or inheritance matters that were on hold begin to resolve. Deeper emotional or psychological transformations that were brewing start to surface. The eighth house is where we hide what we are not ready to face. Jupiter direct here means the facing begins. Scorpio rising. Jupiter in your seventh house of partnerships. Relationship expansion resumes. A commitment deepens. A business partnership advances. The growth that was happening inside the relationship becomes visible between you. Conversations about the future of the partnership that were on hold restart with new clarity. Sagittarius rising. Jupiter in your sixth house of health and daily work. Your routines, health practices, and work systems that were being internally restructured begin producing external results. A health improvement becomes measurable. A work system becomes functional. The daily infrastructure that the retrograde was redesigning internally now gets built externally. Capricorn rising. Jupiter in your fifth house of creativity and romance. Creative projects that were incubating begin to produce output. A romantic connection that was in holding pattern moves forward. Joy and self-expression that felt blocked start to flow. This is one of the most enjoyable Jupiter direct placements because it directly affects your capacity for pleasure. Aquarius rising. Jupiter in your fourth house of home and family. Home-related plans, family dynamics, or foundational changes that were on hold begin moving. A move, renovation, or family reconciliation advances. The foundation you have been internally redesigning starts to take physical form. Pisces rising. Jupiter in your third house of communication and learning. Conversations, writing projects, local connections, and learning initiatives that stalled during retrograde restart. Your ability to communicate and process information expands noticeably. Given that Mercury is still retrograde in your sign, this Jupiter direct creates an interesting tension. The expansion of your communication capacity arrives before the retrograde clears the channel. You have more to say than the channel can currently carry. That tension resolves on March 20th. I want to draw an important distinction between Jupiter expansion and Jupiter inflation because the difference determines whether the direct station produces genuine growth or unsustainable overextension. This is one of the most practically important things I can tell you about Jupiter direct, and it is something most astrology content does not address. Expansion is growth built on real foundation. The eclipse showed you what was real. Jupiter direct is expanding what is real. That is expansion. It is proportional. It builds from something solid. It grows at a rate the structure can support. It feels like a natural unfolding of something that was already developing. The key sensation of genuine expansion is recognition. You recognize the opportunity as connected to work you have already done. It does not feel like a windfall from nowhere. It feels like a return on investment, an investment of time, attention, and the internal processing that the Jupiter retrograde demanded. Inflation is growth built on nothing. Optimism without foundation. Saying yes to everything because Jupiter direct feels like permission to expand in all directions simultaneously. That is inflation. And inflation produces a bubble that eventually corrects. The correction is always proportional to the inflation. Small bubble, small correction. Large bubble, painful correction. The key sensation of inflation is excitement without connection. The opportunity feels thrilling, but you cannot trace a line from it to any internal work you have done. It arrives from outside your process rather than emerging from within it. The way to tell the difference in real time is to check whether the expansion connects to eclipse material. If the thing that is growing was one of the things that survived the eclipse reading, that is expansion. Trust it. If the thing that is growing is new, unconnected to the eclipse work, and fueled primarily by the sudden optimism of Jupiter direct, approach it with caution, not rejection. Caution. Let it prove itself before you invest heavily. Jupiter direct, combined with the eclipse's quality control, is trustworthy growth. Jupiter direct running without the eclipse's filter is potentially inflation. The distinction matters, and it will matter more as the direct motion builds velocity through March. Mars conjuncts the North Node later this week, and I will cover that transit in depth in a dedicated video. But I want to note the interaction here because it stacks with Jupiter direct in a specific way. Jupiter provides the expansion energy. Mars node provides the directional alignment. Together they produce not just growth, but directed growth. Growth with a trajectory. Growth that is aimed at something rather than expanding randomly. If you have been feeling the eclipse material pointing you in a particular direction, and Jupiter direct is now providing the energy to move, Mars node will confirm the direction. The expansion is not aimless. It has a destination. And the destination was identified by the eclipse, refined by the retrograde, confirmed by the cazimi, and is now being amplified by Jupiter direct and aimed by Mars node. The entire sequence from February 20th through this week has been building toward this moment. The structure arrives. The structure is tested. The structure is read by eclipse light. The communication is revised. The expansion begins. The direction confirms. That is the arc, and you are living its acceleration right now. Here is what to begin this week, not what to finish, what to begin. Take the eclipse material that survived, the thing the cazimi confirmed, the want that Venus in Aries named, and take the first concrete step toward it. A tool purchased, a space cleared. A tool purchased, a space cleared. The first step does not need to be large. It needs to be real, and it needs to happen this week while Jupiter direct is fresh and Mars node is approaching its peak alignment. Beginnings made during this window carry a forward momentum that persists long after the transit energy fades. The direction is set by the beginning. And because Jupiter direct is expanding what the eclipse identified as real, the beginning you make this week is not speculative. It is not a shot in the dark. It is an informed beginning. Built on 17 days of observation, testing, eclipse reading, retrograde revision, cazimi confirmation, and Venus in Aries courage. That is 17 days of preparation condensed into this moment. You are not starting from scratch. You are starting from the most informed position you have been in since this transit season began. Make the beginning count. And stay with me. Mars meets the North Node in a few days, and when action aligns with destiny inside Jupiter direct expansion, the acceleration compounds. What starts this week does not just move. It moves in the right direction with increasing speed. The holding is over. The expansion is real. And what was incubated underground for 4 months is ready to see sunlight. Let it grow. The roots are deep. The surface is warm. And what emerges this week has been preparing for this moment longer than you realize. 4 months of invisible work, ready to become visible, starting today, starting now.